And we want to talk about the gold board and all matters arising. Sammy, let's get to it. I mean, after about 6 months of your operation, we started to hear the numbers, the results, and the effect that it was having on the stabilization of our cedi, and by extension, on our economy. I mean, are these numbers real? The hike from 2 million a year to 2 billion a year to about 6 billion in half a year.
Yeah.
How exactly did the Gold Board achieve this?
Thank you very much, my brother. You see, the Gold Board, I've always said, is a product of foresight. Is a product of vision. You know, in opposition, is a conversation that His Excellency President Mahama always had with some of us, because he could not understand why, as a country, we were so blessed with gold. And gold is always the surest way of, getting FX to support one's economy. And yet, we're always struggling with our reserves. We always had to resort to the Eurobond markets to borrow to shore up our FX reserves, especially when the cocoa syndicated loan was no longer forthcoming. And so every now and then the cedi had to depreciate at a very alarming rate. And once that happened, it impacted negatively on inflation and living conditions in the country. And so he began to share with us how we can change that narrative, how we can assert our national sovereignty over our mineral wealth as a people, and use that mineral wealth to generate the much needed forex for the needed FS liquidity for the market, and also to shore up our reserves, because that is fundamental to the economic transformation of every country. So what we realized was that hitherto individuals were allowed to apply for licenses to buy, sell, and export gold. Now, this space was not limited to only Ghanaian participation. Foreigners could also engage in the trading and export of gold. And because foreigners had a bigger financial muscle, they dominated the space. So 70% of the gold export space used to be dominated by Indians. And what we saw was that, yes, Bank of Ghana, under their FX laws, required that anytime you exported anything, including gold, within 30 days, 80% for gold, 80% of the forex had to be repatriated back. But these entities were not, complying with this rule. So they will export, and then it takes forever before the FS comes in. So what you were even reading as gold exports for Ghana was not necessarily translating into FX inflows, because in most cases the FX was not coming. And then we also saw that most of these entities, not all, but most of them, were only using their licenses as a ruse to buy and smuggle gold, because once they had a license, you could not question them for buying gold. But nobody was checking whether what they were declaring and exporting was actually what they were buying. So the small scale gold sector particularly had been totally underestimated in our books in Ghana. When you went to India and Dubai, you saw huge figures in terms of volumes and values of gold from small scale in Ghana that had been exported to their country. But in Ghana, you saw so little, because there was no agency tracking all these things. So the president said the first thing you need to do is to change the legal regime. And that is what led to the passage of the Ghana Gold Board Act in record time, because his instructions to me was that, Sammy, this is a top priority. You must work on it as a matter of urgency. When people heard that I've been appointed to PMMC, people thought that it would take forever for the Gold Board to be established. But I knew what my marching orders from the president were. And so I knew that with the help of stakeholders, like likes of Steve Mantiao, Senyo Husi, the Ghana National Association of Small Scale Miners, the Traders, the Jewelers Association. I knew we could do it. And in record time, we produced a bill which Parliament passed and the President assented to on the 2nd of April of this year, which is hailed as one of the best, legislations that has ever been passed. What that law has done is that now we are asserting our national sovereignty, like I said. You cannot buy gold and export gold from Ghana as an individual, whether foreigner or Ghanaian. The state is saying that we have a central agency which will be responsible for all gold purchases in Ghana, be it small scale or large scale. The large scale companies have stability agreements that allows them to export the chunk of the gold they produce, but 20% of that is bought locally by the Gold Board. And so far we've bought in excess of 120 kilograms of large scale gold, which goes directly into our reserves at the Bank of England. But for small scale, you don't even have a choice. No foreigner. We banned that space, because why should we allow foreigners to take over everything in this country? If it's about mopping up small scale gold, do we need foreigners to do that? No. Government says if capital is a problem, we are giving Gold Board the needed capital. And once Gold Board has a capital, we won't give foreigners the money to go and buy for us. We'll give it to our citizens. So foreigners leave the local gold trade space for Ghanaians. And so even for the Ghanaians,
lawful for them.
Yes, it's criminal. You can go to jail for 10 to 15 years if you are caught as a foreigner to be engaging in gold trading. And then even for the Ghanaians, we are saying we want to know you. So you must have a license from the Gold Board before you can buy, and you only buy for and on behalf of the Gold Board. So we changed this regime and we introduced new licensing reforms. Hitherto, PMMC issued gold buying licenses. Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources issued gold buying licenses that allowed holders of the licenses to export gold. Now it is not the case. Now we have different categories, different tiers of licenses, because if you want to maximize resource, you must be innovative, and address the peculiar issues in the gold trading sector. So what we saw was that all the buyers are not the same, and therefore you can't regulate them in the same manner. So now we have grassroots buyers of the Gold Board, who we call tier 1 buyers. These are the petty buyers who buy small volumes. Most of them don't have offices, and they ride on motorcycles or bicycles, move from one area to the other, buying from kuli, small volumes of gold. But they are very important to the value chain. And the regulations for them are totally different from the big buyers, who we call tier 2 buyers, well-structured buyers with offices. They can have up to 3 offices in any part of the country to buy gold, and there are systems in place, both governance and legal requirements, financial requirements, and operational requirements that we have put in place for them.
You check all these before you do business with them.
Exactly, and we do anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing assessments on them before we give them licenses. And then, because we want to make sure that any money involved in gold trade in Ghana is of a clean source. That's very important, so that one day we don't wake up to the news that Ghana has been blacklisted, for breach of AML laws and so on. Then we have the aggregators, who are the mega buyers for Gold Board. And so far there is only one. We used to have about 4. The number has come down to 1, because the licensing requirements are very stringent, and we have self-financing aggregators, all of whom are Ghanaians, who use their own funds to buy gold under a different regime for the Gold Board. So we introduced these licensing reforms. We also